In light of Thor's recent 501 deadlift attempt at the Arnolds, which unfortunately he didn't get, it got me thinking what the top strongmen could do if they were to deadlift under powerlifting conditions. Luckily, we can answer that question because there have been several top-level strongmen who have attempted to deadlift in powerlifting competitions. So in this video, I'm going to go through what the differences are in deadlifts between strongman and powerlifting, because there is quite a difference. I'm also going to look at the top 8 heaviest deadlifts ever done to powerlifting standards by top-level strongmen. And some of them have a pretty big difference between them, some of them don't, so it may surprise you. So first, let's go through the powerlifting deadlift and some of the rules that there are. So first, no straps. So no straps means grip is a huge factor, and that's something you'll see coming up in this video quite a bit. And there's Kasim-san, for an example, dropping a deadlift at Sheffield. He also dropped a deadlift at Worlds. So for each of these rules, I'm going to show you an example of a lifter who failed due to these technicalities. So there's Kasim-san dropping a deadlift. No hitching. So hitching is basically, sort of shaking, locking, unlocking the knees, trying to, shimmy the weight up your legs, essentially. There's an example of Timur Semkaradze attempting the heaviest deadlift in the IPF of 415, which he stood up with. Definitely would have passed under strongman conditions. However, to get it there, he had to, do a bit of a shake, bit of a shimmy, and ended up getting red lighted for it. So that 415 attempt was not given as a lift at Worlds last year. No ramping. So ramping is kind of sort of similar to hitching, but rather than sort of shimmying, locking, unlocking the legs, you're sort of almost pushing the knees forward and, using your quads or thighs to ramp the bar up. It's a bit hard to explain, but an example that I could think of is Joey Awala, who at 2023 Junior Worlds attempted a 332.5 deadlift for the win to pull himself from 8th place into 1st place. Literally went all in from 8th to 1st, and he stood up with it, but he got red lighted due to ramping. No up-down motion. So even if you lock it out without hitching, without ramping, and you don't drop it, the bar has to go up in one swift upward motion. It can stop, but it can't go down. And an example of this, which commonly you see this with sumo deadlifters having a bit of a speed bobble at the top, but Jonathan Garcia in his opening deadlift at 2024 Worlds had this happen, and even though he stood up with it easily, he got red lighted, so he had to take a more conservative second and miss his third, and that will cost him a world championship victory. Your knees, hips, and shoulders must be fully locked out. So you have to stand, that's the definition of a true lockout: knees, hips, and shoulders. There's an example of Shell's second attempt deadlift at Sheffield, where he was red lighted due to, I believe, a soft lockout mainly in the shoulders. He later came back on his third attempt and hit it. And you can see that it's pretty, still looks pretty good. Like, it's definitely, strongman-wise, a good deadlift. And you'll see in strongman, there have been some pretty dodgy calls on lockout, including one that I'm going to go through in this video that I think is absolutely egregious that he was given as a good lift. But anyway. And finally, no dropping. So that's Yusuf El Asnawi, I believe it is, with a 345 deadlift in the 67.5 kilo weight class in some random federation somewhere. So technically world record. However, he dropped it, and that's what the controversy was when this happened a few months ago, that he pretty much dropped the weight. He didn't lower it to the ground, so he should have been given red lights. But yeah, even if you do all that right in the powerlifting deadlift, you stand up with it under all those rules, you still have to return it back to the floor under control, which, to be fair, is also the same in strongman. You can't drop the weight in strongman. But in strongman, it doesn't matter because you have straps. This is probably the biggest single difference, is straps are allowed in strongman. So grip is completely taken out. Grip is a non-factor when it comes to the strongman deadlift, which, to be honest, I'm a fan of in strongman, because strongman events already contain grip tests, right? There's already events that test your grip. You have frame carries, you have like wrecking ball holds, you have all this sort of stuff. So I'm completely okay with the deadlift being with straps. And contrary to all those other technical rules we had in powerlifting deadlift, with strongman, you just have to stand up with it and lock it out by any means necessary. You can ramp it, you can hitch it, you can do whatever the hell you need to do to stand up with it. The biggest example of this is Rob Kearney, who is the master of the ultimate hitch. I mean, there he is deadlifting, I believe, like 900 plus pounds, 440 kilos, somewhere around there, 970 pounds. Also, by the way, I have pounds in this video as well due to popular demand. I now have both units. But yeah, he basically gets the bar to just above his knees, sits all the way back, rests it completely on his legs, and then from there stands up. That is, yeah, the biggest example of a hitch. And even if you don't go to those extremes, you can still, like in powerlifting deadlift, it's common to have people stuck at lockout. In a strongman deadlift, that's not happening because you can just shake your way there. You can hitch, you can do whatever, you can unlock and relock your knees. And no sumo is the only other rule. No sumo. So there's Jamal Brownell, who's actually an example of the opposite of what I'm looking at in this video, a powerlifter who attempted a strongman style deadlift. So Jamal Brownell in the gym with straps, sumo, pulled 500 kilos. In competition, he's pulled 460. Sumo as well. I believe he's pulled 1,000 pounds conventional in the gym as well, in lead up to the World Deadlift Championships in 2023, where he hit 430, but unfortunately was unsuccessful with 455 or 1,000 pounds. But yeah, there's no sumo, there's only conventional. That's an interesting example of Jamal Brownell, going the other way from powerlifting to a strongman style deadlift. But okay, getting into it. So our top 8 heaviest powerlifting deadlifts ever done by strongman. So I'm going to compare their best ever strongman conditioned deadlift with what they achieved in the powerlifting stage. So Graham Hicks, 470 kilos is his best ever pull, which he did at 2023 World Deadlift Championships, which he ended up winning, 1,036 pounds. He attempted 505 at that competition and got it to, I believe it was just below his knees. So it was actually a fairly decent attempt, one of the better attempts we've seen at 505 or 500 plus. His best powerlifting style deadlift is 405 kilos, 893 pounds. So that was done at the 2018 Andy Bolton Deadlift Challenge, which I couldn't find footage of. So this is instead his 402.5 kilo deadlift attempt at Big Dogs in 2019, which he actually dropped and missed. You can see his right hand opening up there. I believe he got 390 at that competition and then missed that 402.5. So pretty big difference there from Graham Hicks. And granted, there's a few years difference here. And I'm also aware that there are several other differences. The elephant in the room, strongman allows suits, right? So you can wear single ply, multiply deadlift suits, whatever you want. Whereas, I'm comparing these to raw powerlifting numbers. Some of the strongman deadlifts on this list are going to be raw. Some of them are going to be equipped. Some of them are going to be with an elephant bar. Some of them are going to be with just the standard deadlift bar. I understand this isn't a perfect comparison. I'm just giving some, overview of roughly what you can expect a top strongman to be able to do under powerlifting conditions. So that, if you're watching a 410 deadlift by Jesus or Timo, then you can really appreciate how crazy that is. Number 7, Ivan Makarov. 480 kilos or 1,058 pounds is his most successful strongman deadlift ever. Now, I say most successful. This is the lift I was talking about that I think was absolutely egregious in the lockout. That is not locked out. It's so obvious. It's even more obvious on video. But his hips aren't locked out at all. His knees aren't locked out. How he got a down command, I don't know. But how he got white lights for this, I also don't know. But it was given to him. This was done in 2021. And this is the 4th heaviest deadlift of all time. Now, as much as I think that pull shouldn't have stood, he has pulled a legit 475. which he did at the 2021 Deadlift World Championships. So whether you can that 475 or that 480, it's still pretty much like a top 4 ever deadlift, really. So yeah, crazy strong Ivan Makarov, and he's attempted 500 plus more times than I can count. Unfortunately, at this point, it looks like it might have gotten away from him. He's had several attempts, and I think his last couple of attempts have looked almost worse and worse, which is unfortunate. But yeah, Ivan Makarov, absolute beast. I'm going to count the 480 just because it was given to him, but yeah, pretty dodge. His most successful powerlifting deadlift was 405 kilos done at a 2017 WRPF meet, which I also couldn't exactly find footage of. So instead, that photo is of him attempting 410 at 2018 WRPF meet, where it actually wasn't given to him. So that lift wasn't given as a good lift, which kind of hilarious comparing those side by side. Looking at those lifts, which one of those do you think was not given to him? Surely the one on the left. Well, it's actually the opposite. Left was a good lift on the strongman conditions, right was not in powerlifting conditions. This is literally just a screenshot that I found scrolling through his Facebook page. I couldn't find the video, but from what I gather, he ended up dropping this and couldn't return it back to the floor under control, or his hands open up or whatever, because I can't imagine there's anything wrong with that lockout position. He's definitely locked out, unlike his on the left there. But yeah, I believe that was his last ever powerlifting competition that he did. After that, he just went all in on strongman there. Number 6, Peiman Maheripourehir. 485 kilos or 1,069 pounds is the 3rd heaviest deadlift ever done, behind the obvious 2, Eddie and Thor. Peiman did this in 2023, so it was actually quite recently that he did this, and in training he pulled 492 kilos, I believe, leading into this or around this similar time. So he's one of the closest guys to getting to that 500, apart from, Thor and I guess Ivan. Now looking at powerlifting, his best ever deadlift is, again, similar to the other two we've looked at so far, 405 kilos. Seems like that seems to be the common number for a lot of these guys. But he did that in 2018, and he missed 430 kilos. Sorry, no, not 430, 415. Yeah, so 2019 WRPF meet this was. He missed 415 kilos after this, and that 405 moved very smoothly. Yeah, he obviously has a lot more. He's one of the guys, though, that really benefits from that kind of being able to hitch at lockout, because if you see him, his deadlifts are lightning off the floor, but when he gets to lockout, he sort of has to really, shimmy and shake and, lock and unlock the knees, ramp it up, hitch it up, which obviously you can't do in powerlifting conditions. I also think he gets a lot out of a suit, because he always deadlifts in a suit in strongman style. Number 5 is the man of the hour, Hafthor Bjornsson, who, despite missing 501 just a few hours ago, hit 501 back in 2020, 1105 pounds, the heaviest deadlift ever done. I'm not going to get into, should it stand, should it not stand, it was a home gym, and yada yada. The fact is, he stood up with 501 kilos, so there you go. However, his best ever deadlift in powerlifting conditions is 410 at a WRPF meet he did in 2018, which was super easy and super smooth. He attempted 430 after this, took a 20 kilo jump, and that was the image you saw in my thumbnail where he dropped it sort of just around the knees, because his grip gave out. But I mean, this is the biggest gap in, like so far with lifters we looked at, there's been a pretty significant difference already, but this is the biggest one, like 91 kilo difference. And I know, he was doing it equipped, but it still kind of shows you that 410, I mean, that's below what the IPF world record is on a stiff bar done by tested powerlifters. And I know that, Hafthor would have the strength for more, but there you go, 91 kilo difference, pretty significant. All right, Jerry Pritchett. So Jerry Pritchett, 467.5, 1,031 pounds, and that was done at 2017 Arnold's, which was the world record at the time. And he also pulled 465 at 2016 World Deadlift Championships, which was the same meet where Eddie Hall pulled his famous 500. So that 465 would have been equipped. 467.5 he did raw, but it was on an elephant bar. I'm still counting it anyway in this list. And powerlifting wise, 415 kilos or 915 pounds he pulled. And that was done in 2016 at an IPL meet somewhere. And he stood up with this like you wouldn't believe. This was nowhere near Joe Pritchett's max. I'm pretty sure he just did this because at the time this was the American deadlift record. So he just took it in what was an easy pull. Unlike some of the other lifters on this list, he actually has quite a smooth pull. It's an interesting one with like a crazy wide stance and wide grip, almost like a snatch grip deadlift, but he doesn't have any crazy like hitching. It's usually a pretty smooth pull. And that 415, I reckon he would have had a lot more in there. If he had wanted to push his deadlift up in powerlifting, he absolutely could have, in my opinion. He just didn't seem too interested in that. But yeah, that was the same year he pulled 465 at the World Deadlift Championships, and 467.5 is his best ever deadlift overall. So not as big a difference, but still over 50 kilos. On to the top 3 is Mikhail Koklyaev, whose best ever strongman deadlift was 422.5 or 931 pounds, which was done at 2012 Arnold Europe. And I found a few pixels off it there. You can make out that that's roughly a man deadlifting. That's literally the best footage I could find of it. It's kind of funny digging back into old strongman and powerlifting archives where there's like literally it was filmed with a potato. Now Mikhail Koklyaev though, this is interesting. His best ever powerlifting deadlift was 417.5, 920 pounds, which he also did in 2012. And that's only a 5 kilo difference. So Mikhail Koklyaev, unlike a lot of other people on this list, is someone who didn't seem like he got too much out of the strongman rule set when it came to deadlifts. Based on how that 417.5 moved in 2012, I think he could have loaded another 5 kilos and probably matched his best ever strongman deadlift. And I think that's just with the way he pulls, very smooth, very Olympic weightlifting background. So kind of almost like an Olympic weightlifting style start to it. He pulled it with ease, and yeah, he wasn't someone that really hitched a lot. All his deadlifts were pretty smooth. Now, fun fact. Technically speaking, this record, this 417.5 by Mikhail Koklyaev, is the heaviest deadlift done under tested conditions, because he did this at an FPR meet in Russia. FPR is the tested affiliate of the IPF in Russia. So that's the same meet that Fedosienko competed in, his same federation Fedosienko competed in his whole career, Sergei Gladkik, all the top Russian IPF lifters. And Mikhail Koklyaev pulled 417.5 there. So if you go onto open powerlifting and you sort by, tested feds or tested lifters by deadlift, this will be number 1. So when I was making my greatest deadlifters videos and, putting together all my world records, I sort of had to apply a bit of critical thinking here and go, you know what, I'm not one to ever speculate on someone's natty status, which, I've had some of those discussions in some of my previous comments. I'm not one to, speculate. I always give them benefit of the doubt. But in this case, this is the one exception where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to apply some critical thinking here and assume that this was not done tested. Mikhail Koklyaev had been a top level strongman from the 2000s. So for several years up until that point. And he had elite weightlifting numbers, but he was never able to make it to the Olympic weightlifting team because of he either refused to undergo doping tests or didn't pass them. I'm not exactly sure what the go was there, but there was definitely some drama around that. And yeah, if you're expecting me to believe that he was truly a tested lifter, I'm sorry, I just don't believe it. Although, the one thing I will say, that 417.5 done 13 years ago still stands as the heaviest deadlift ever done on a stiff bar, ever. No one's beat that. So that is the one thing that still stands, that record that he still holds, 417.5, heaviest ever deadlift on a stiff bar. Unfortunately for Mikhail though, he's not even the strongest Russian Mikhail on this list, because number 2 is Mikhail Shivlyakov. His best ever deadlift was 442, 974 pounds, done at the Arnold's in 2019, I believe that was. Yeah, it was 2019. 2018 was his Arnold's pull of, I think, 426 that went viral because so much blood came pouring out of his nose. It was a crazy grinder. But yeah, famous for grinding out deadlifts. His Masters world record that he did around 2020 of 430 something was also absolutely insane. That 442 actually wasn't as much of a grinder compared to some of his other ones. But that's an example of, like, you just can't grind like that in powerlifting because you would get red lighted for all sorts of infractions. But his best of a powerlifting deadlift is 418 kilos, 922 pounds. So half a kilo over Mikhail Koklyaev. He chipped it by half a kilo to beat, you know, that Russian world record, Russian record, I guess. And that was done at a 2018 WRPF meet. So around the same time when he was sort of in peak deadlifting shape. And again, not as much difference as some of the other lifters, but still, yeah, that 418, any more than that, and, you know, he just has to grind in such a way that would not be legal in powerlifting. Okay, we are ready for the number 1, and I'm sure you guys know who this is. It is the greatest Icelandic powerlifter, sorry, the greatest Icelandic deadlifter, you could argue over Thor, definitely in powerlifting. It is Benedikt Magnusson. So Benny's best ever deadlift under strongman conditions is 465 kilos that he pulled at the 2016 Deadlift World Championships. It's the same meet where Joe Pritchett also pulled 465, the same meet where Eddie Hall speed repped 465 and then stood up with 500. 1,025 pounds. And Benedikt also attempted the 500 but couldn't quite get it. Joe Pritchett also attempted it and tore his hamstring, which I didn't mention when I was talking about him. But 465, absolutely huge. It was in the years preceding this, he went back and forth with Eddie Hall for the deadlift world record. Back when it was, you know, it was around about the 460s range for a few years there, and then they kept upping it by 1 kilo until Eddie decided to up it by a full 37 kilos on that one night. His best ever powerlifting deadlift is 460.4 kilos, 1,015 pounds. This was done in 2011 at a random meet in a random fed that I don't even know. And this stood as the heaviest deadlift ever done in powerlifting for a full 11 years until Danny Grigsby came along and broke it in 2022. And since upped it to 487.5, I think. So this is currently the second heaviest powerlifting deadlift ever done. It still stands as the heaviest conventional deadlift ever done in powerlifting. Benedikt Magnusson also holds the record for the heaviest conventional deadlift done in a full power meet, which was 442.5, that he did in 2010, because this 460.4 was done in a deadlift only meet. Now I will say that there is a bit of controversy with this because, you know, there were some people saying that, you know, the plates weren't exactly what they said they were, and there were quite a few lifters at that meet hitting crazy numbers. You know, so it wasn't the most reputable fed, it wasn't the most reputable competition or standards or whatever, but I will say that this is still, a lot of people still consider this the most impressive deadlift of all time, and I can see their point. He stood up with that pretty smoothly. You know, it was just a proper powerlifting conventional deadlift, except it was done with over 1,000 pounds, which, you know, no one is particularly close even today to breaking this conventional deadlift record. So yeah, pretty wild from Benedikt Magnusson there. And yeah, he sets it down super lightly as well with a smile on his face. Absolute legend. The greatest strongman, the greatest powerlifting deadlift of a strongman ever done, Benedikt Magnusson.